Okay, I want to keep us close to schedule, so we'll get started now and let more people in as they join. Good morning and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to see everybody here. We have about 70 participants right now. My name is Julie Miller. I'm with the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship at Haverford College. We are just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As we go through the webinar today, I'll be the person you want to chat with directly if you're experiencing any technical issues. So if you if you can't chat, you might want to send me an email. So just reply to the message with the webinar link if you're having any serious issues. But otherwise, you'll be able to find my name, Julie Miller, in the chat function. So you'll be able to either message the whole group, which would be great when you're asking questions at the end of the webinar. But if you only want to private message me, just find my name in the list, and I'll be able to help you out with anything that you're having trouble with. So today's webinar is co-sponsored by 3 membership networks at the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship here at Haverford. We are members of the first 2, and we host the 3rd. Those networks are the Pennsylvania Council for International Education, also known as PACE, the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development, known as FEND, and the community-based Global Learning Collaborative, known as the Collaborative for short. While these 3 networks all have different missions, their missions overlap at the intersection of supporting diverse people working together on campuses and in communities to co-create a more welcoming, just, inclusive, and sustainable community. Today's webinar will focus specifically on Dickinson College and their ability to, what they've learned and how they pivoted international education during COVID this year. So in terms of the technology you're using, most people have probably been experienced with Zoom at this point, but just in case you want a refresher, I'm Julie. You can find me in the chat function, which will be at the bottom of your screen. It says chat, you can click on that, and then you'll see it says to everyone or to individual people. If you're having any technical issues, just find my name in that list and you can send me a private message. And if you get kicked out of the meeting at any point, just email me, reply to the email where you got the meeting link, and I'll try to get you back in. So now I think I'm passing the mic over to the Dickinson folks for their presentation.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for this webinar titled Global Teaching and Learning in the Time of COVID-19, Open Access, Virtual Collaborations and New Global Learning Pathways. Let's just get to know each other. My name is Bruno Grazioli. I'm connecting with you today from Bologna, Italy, where I'm the resident director of the Italian Studies program for Dickinson College.
Good morning, I'm Samantha Brandauer, Associate Provost and Executive Director in the Center for Global Study and Engagement, based at Dickinson in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Julia, Lindsey, you want to introduce yourselves?
I was muted. Hi, everyone. Julia Carnine. I'm coming to you from Toulouse, France, and where I'm resident director of the Study Abroad program for France and Francophone Studies Department, and also contributing faculty.
Hi, good morning, and I'm Lindsey Lyons from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and I'm the assistant director in our Center for Sustainability Education.
And for those of you who might not be familiar with Dickinson College is a private 4-year residential liberal arts college located in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and it welcomed usually around 2,400 students. Our fall semester is due to begin in just a few days on Monday the 17th, and everything will be remote. And the end of this presentation today, we'll also trying to connect back to how our experience in the last few months actually have helped us move forward in the new semester. Again, thank you to these organizations that Julie already mentioned. And let's go through the goals for these webinar today. These are the same goals, learning objectives that you've read on the website. We will share with you information, experience about our collaboration within Dickinson, among the 4 of us, and actually more people too are not here today, but also across institutions, particularly with the Haverford College. We will share with you our experience in team teaching a course, a summer course, and we will also share with you information about how we think we've developed new global learning pathways. At the end of this webinar, you will also gain insight about how to leverage the open access toolkit that Eric Harman will introduce us in just a few minutes, and also how to contribute to that if you may want to do that.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Eric Hartman. I'm Executive Director of the Haverford College Center for Peace and Global Citizenship and co-founder and editor of the Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative. I was really through the collaborative and its network of institutions and its home here at Haverford College that we were able to develop this toolkit we'll hear a little bit about today. And to introduce the collaborative, I just wanted to share with you our mission, but I'm going to highlight for you, our mission is about process and about outcomes. And I think one of the distinctive things about the collaborative is that we're focused on the co-creation of just, inclusive, sustainable communities. And we're thinking about the role of higher education partnership in that co-creation. Process we're dedicated to, and now I'll share with you our whole mission. We're a network of really a cohort of institutions and organizations and individuals that advance ethical, critical, aspirationally decolonial, community-based learning and research for more just, inclusive, and sustainable communities. We're housed here at Haverford College Center for Peace and Global Citizenship in Philadelphia, and our values relating to that work are that we love participatory work. So the toolkit that we're looking at today was something that grew out of a network of people who, when the pandemic first really hit, looked around and said, how are we going to flip to online learning when we have values that relate to civic and global education? How are we going to do that together? And a lot of people sort of formed a coalition of the willing. We're committed to it being participatory. We'll talk more about that later. There's still opportunities to contribute. And we're committed to it being public. So just share from the lens of where I am at Haverford College outside of Philadelphia. When we started working on this as an institution, we said, we don't want this to just be something that if we get good tools together, that they're only available for our students. So how can we do it in a way that others might use it? And we've been really fortunate to have great colleagues like the folks at Dickinson who were leading and co-contributing and helping us to make it accessible. And I say accessible, something is funny in the ethos of higher ed. We put it on the internet and people still send us notes to say, is it okay if we use it? Can we, et cetera? Please use it in your own course management software, adapt it to your purposes. It's out there. If you think it works well, then please do use it. So thanks, speaking of coalitions of the willing, thanks for taking time to be with us here this morning. It says something about your interest and values this morning in the East Coast of the US, I should say, which brings me to the next piece. We do have this chat that Julie mentioned, and there's about 100 people in the room right now. So we thought I'd take a moment and just introduce ourselves and be quiet in a minute, ask you to share, where are you and what brings you to the conversation? Just a really short, what are you hoping for, or what values, or what's your work? So I'll share that, chatting to everyone about where I am and what brings me and interests me. And your phrase could be much shorter than mine, or however you like, but I'll just wait for others to pop in there. that has been amazing and still happening. It's really fun to see everybody here. I'm going to move back over to the Dickinson colleagues who will lead the session that I'm really looking forward to. And as a kickoff, I just want to thank them and everyone, Julie Miller, Nora Reynolds, Stephanie Keene, who are here, who have been part of building the toolkit, and then the Dickinson colleagues here presenting today. We arranged this presentation for this time because we thought maybe more folks would be thinking about flipping toward online efforts at civic and global learning at this point in time. It's unfortunate, and we wish that weren't the case, but we've been really rushing to put this together, and I know it's been a ton of work on the part of the Dickinson team, and looking forward to hearing what they've learned through all of that work. And lastly, the FEND, PACey, and the Collaborative are sponsoring a series. So at the end, I'll share a link to the next series, which is really K-12 focused in terms of this kind of work. So looking forward to the presentation. Thank you all.
Good morning, good afternoon. Again, I'm Samantha Brandauer in the Center for Global Study and Engagement at Dickinson. And I just want to sort of take you a little bit on the journey of how we got here. It looks like from the chat, a lot of people today with us joining us are international educators, and so faced the crisis, sort of international education in March, and started dealing with bringing students home, and we were doing a lot of undoing. At Dickinson, sort of what made this particularly relevant was we have a really big global footprint. So even though we're a small liberal arts college, we have 18 programs in 15 countries all over the world with permanent staff and faculty based in locations. You're meeting Bruno and Julia today, who are part of that team. And so I really started to think about, as we're suspending spring, looking at canceling summer, and as Bruno mentioned, Dickinson has gone all remote for the fall. What does this mean for continued global learning without mobility? What does this mean for me to keep sort of my centers and people intact as we manage this crisis? Started having conversations with Eric about the toolkit he was building in April, and quickly sort of pivoted to my folks and said, hey, this is something that I think really fits with Dickinson. It gets at some of our core pillars, which are global diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability, education, and civic engagement. I think we have a lot of expertise to help out. And so starting in April, we connected to start writing some of the modules for the toolkit. And then sort of looking at all the content we were developing, I turned to people and said, hey, why don't we turn this into a summer course? We don't have students going abroad this summer. This would be a new way to engage. So there were 6 of us that connected across 4 countries on a very tight timeline. We sort of came up with the idea to teach a summer, or I did in April, and by June we were launching a month-long summer course with students. We recruited 5 students, which I think is not terrible considering our tight timeline, and we had an amazing group of students. Bruno's going to talk a little bit about more of the students and sort of what they learned. I think, one of the really big highlights for me of teaching the course was it was really set up as an opportunity to co-learn. The 6 of us learned so much from each other, from working with each other in this very new way in a virtual space. And the course content, and I think if you look at dig into the toolkit, you'll see this too. There's just so much opportunity to learn from the learners. We all learned a lot from our students. The content was extremely timely. It gave us this wonderful space to process what was going on in the world at the moment, with each other, with our students. The sort of lead up time and the amount of time we all spent in communication was very sort of healing and positive. And again, I would just stress that the toolkit development, as many of you in international education have been doing a lot of sort of doom and gloom projecting, came at a time that I needed something very hopeful and future forward, and wanted to bring my people into something that helped us stay positive and build instead of just tearing down. So Bruno, take it away.
So let me tell you a few things about the course that Samantha just introduced. The course came about, I mean, everything in the last few months came about unexpectedly quite quickly, and so did the course. We worked on a schedule that was quite short, not terribly short, but we began conversation around the course in April. At the time, for example, the remote semester from Bologna wasn't even over. So we began the conversation about the summer course then, and we started teaching the course at the end of May. On the screen there, you can see the title. The title of the course is One Earth, Multiple Worlds, Engaging Global Solidarity and Sustainability with Student Action. And you can see that the course code, there are 2 course codes because it was cross-listed between international, independent studies and sustainability. The learning goals, I won't go through all of them in details, but you can read them. They highlight the topics and the themes of the course: so sustainability, global citizenship, and globalized communities. One of the requirements that we for students to participate in this course was for them to have significant international experience and awareness. And that's where, for example, learning goal, I think it's 3 comes in. So we wanted to meet with students who had already studied abroad or possibly were actually international students. And we particularly pitched this course to them, to those who had already studied abroad, who were international students. So the toolkit made it possible for us to create the course because, especially working in such a short schedule, we had already 50% of the content of the course ready when we began this conversation. Because at that point, we had already, as a team, we had already been working with Eric on the toolkit, and that's where we started creating the syllabus and the course content for our summer course. Just to give you an idea, again, Sam mentioned that there were 5 students in the end, which is quite entertaining, given that there were 6 instructors. Just to give you an idea about how these were, so there were 11 people located in 3 time zones, 3 in Europe, 2 on both coasts in the United States. What happened? How did we meet? So just to give you an idea, instructional format, the course met for up to 40 hours. For 40 hours over the course of 4 weeks between the end of May and the end of July this year. We had 3 weekly meetings of 75 synchronous meetings, so online, and students had to work for up to 7 hours a week on the road for asynchronous work. And this is exactly where the toolkit came in handy, because in order for students to prepare from one class meeting to the other, they had to refer pretty much constantly to the toolkit, and from where we assign different pages so the students could read, watch videos, engage in reflecting questions, and then meet with us during our weekly meetings and report back to us. Themes and topics of the course, we've already seen them in the learning goals, but again, there were 4 main topics: sustainability, interdependence and global citizenship, diversity, equity and inclusion, and civic engagement. The course, as you just heard me saying just a moment ago, was organized around 4 weeks, and each week had 1 module. Each module was based on one of these 4 topics. And the 6 of us didn't teach all at the same time, of course, but we took turns 2 at a time per week. So each weekly module was taught by 2 people. Out of the 6 members of our team, there was 1 coordinator, that was me in this case, which we decided that was needed in order to liaise with everybody and supervise and make sure that we were constantly on the same page in terms of communicating with students and also abiding by what we had set out in our course syllabus. And again, as I said before, the course counted in the end for both for an interdisciplinary or sustainability course. one of the things, so one of the aims of our presentation today is definitely to share with you challenges and rewards of our experience teaching together, team teaching the schools. And so we've organized them around these three main highlight topics: organization, communications, and flexibility. Again, working with people, with a team of people in 2 different time zones in 4 different countries, but also working with a team of people made of colleagues and students in so many different locations in the world. Obviously, proved challenging, but not impossible. So communication had to be rethought. We had to communicate in different ways. And obviously we use the tools that were made available to us by our institutional tools, that's Teams and SharePoint and also Moodle, that are available automatically with a Dickinson account. But we also communicated with social media that we have available today on our phones, and specifically WhatsApp. So we created 2 group chats, one for our team, one for students. And we basically, there was a very easy and quick way of checking in, making sure that we knew exactly what to do, reminding us about upcoming deadlines, and doing the same with students. And we also, in particular in the group chat for the class with the students, we clarified at the very beginning that there was to be used as a teaching tool, as a course tool, and not for chit-chatting. And since, as we all well know, a lot of things happen in the world, and particularly in the United States, apart from COVID, the group chat on WhatsApp became a powerful way of sending students links to online articles, videos, news that each one of us was finding relevant, and relevant because it actually could connect to the course topics on a daily basis. The new global flexibility, that's a very important one, sorry. So all of this obviously require lots of flexibility on everybody's part, not just in terms of being available to working odd hours basically, because for example, in Europe we met with students at 6 p.m, whereas on the East Coast was 12 o'clock, and there was one student in California who would join us at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, but also, being available, being a summer course, being available to students pretty much when they wanted us to be available for them. We also intended flexibility in terms of, on a deeper level. The 6 of us were and are people who have very different backgrounds, come from different education sort of paths. Some of us have a more specific focus on teaching and research, others have been administrator in international education. So really these men meeting on the same level and learning from each other. And sort of working together in order to make this course possible. And I think this really worked well because ultimately we had the same goals and objectives, which were exactly what you read in the learning goals. I mean, these are all things we're passionate about. In terms of new global learning pathways, well, we think we've made actually a good job in developing an interdisciplinary approach, specifically for the reasons I've just said, that we all came and had different backgrounds and expertise. And one of our goals was to make our course, our class, more of a community than a sort of a one-way street way of communication with students. Definitely because there were 6 of us and 5 of them, but also because we wanted students who signed up for this course were students who are passionate about something. And I'm going to say something about this in just a minute. Students who had something to say, students who had already experienced firsthand something that they felt needs change in the world. And so this is definitely something that we wanted to learn from them. And so we offered our point of view, our expertise, in order for them to further their understanding of what they're passionate about. And this is where the final project came about. The final project was really the bow on this gift in a way. What you see at the top of the slide in italics. That's a question, that's sort of a question, a problem that we ask students to address at the very beginning of the course. Before we met, we asked students to make a video presentation of themselves, as much as we did, answering that, addressing that question. So we asked them to think of a wicked problem and describe something that they were passionate about, but that they didn't think was quite working as it was and needed to be changed. For the final project, they had to circle back to this original initial problem and basically rethink about what they told us at the very beginning of the course, but by applying the lenses and applying all the tools that we had shared with them during the 4 weeks of the course. So in particular, they had to write a narrative about the wicked problem and community-based solutions they chose to focus on using the lenses acquired during the course, and present a summary of this narrative in a pre-recorded video presentation that we all watched. The 11 of us watched a full meeting one final time on July 2nd, when we met essentially to have a conversation about these videos. In one of the final slides of this presentation, there will be a link to one of these videos that our students made, and we're pretty sure that you'll be amazed about what these students were able to do. We definitely were amazed about how much they were able to take their problems, their passion further, thanks to conversations we had during the class, and definitely thanks to the toolkit that basically made this all possible. One fun thing about the final project, we really wanted students to see a benefit in making this final project, and so out of these 5 students, 3 were rising seniors and 2 were recent graduates who were obviously looking around for job opportunities, internships opportunities, were having interviews. So we told them that this video, they had to create a video presentation that they will be able to use for future projects, like, for example, a job or internship interview. And so, again, once you will have the chance to watch that video that one of our students made, you will see how pretty powerful that is. And finally, I mean, we need to see what students said about team teaching, obviously, to see if it really worked. And these are just 4 excerpts from the final course evaluations that basically highlight how they appreciate the fact that thanks to having 6 different instructors in front of them, they were able to be constantly encouraged to keep the conversation and the reflection process going, but also to really benefit from different points of view that came from people who were located in different parts of the world, different experiences, different backgrounds. And let me see if I'm missing something. And that's it. So we were glad that these worked out, and we're glad that students were able to see that. Great.
And I'm Lindsey Lyons. I'm actually reporting from the Center for Sustainability Education. So they've asked me to share, next slide, Bruno, if you don't mind, I think. They've asked me to share a little bit about the lessons that we learned from this. And I think the greatest gain and takeaway that I have had in this is that this provided like a really practical application to connect the different people that you see on this webinar and the different offices that our institutions may have, sustainability, global education, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We often operate in silos, and a recent critical dialogue with the Forum on Education Abroad at their annual conference revealed that international education professionals, rarely are working with sustainability offices on their campuses. And we have it, what we learned from this is that was a complete win-win. Not just the personal relationships that we gained, but we learned a lot about each other's strategic goals and plans and where things are headed in developing both the toolkit information as well as teaching the course together. There's actually nothing like team teaching to bring people together, as we've learned. But the other really great thing that came out of this was we at Dickinson, and I'm sure many of you are facing this as well, that work in sustainability. We are looking for ways to help people see that sustainability education is about more than the environment and saving the planet and recycling. And we are looking for ways to help people realize that building resilient, sustainable communities, you know, through civic engagement work is a natural connection, and something that can be a really wonderful learning opportunity for our students. And you know, we also were able to find a gap, I think, in our academic curriculum. The toolkit is very thoughtful and reflective, which sometimes we don't make the space for in our classrooms necessarily. You know, it's new content and it's moving forward so quickly that it's sometimes difficult to make the space to allow the students to think about their experiences outside of class, inside of class, right? And this class that was the majority of it. The goal was to provide them a learning environment where they could take their abroad experiences or international experiences and apply those to this learning, which was really great. As for the toolkit, the idea of creating a place where our asynchronous content could be all in one place was really, really useful. You know, you can send students all over the internet to find the resources that you need, but that can often be overwhelming. So the toolkit was nice to just have one place to point them, as well as have one place to sort of keep us as instructors organized and have a flow right in front of us. Both allowed us to sort of apply the knowledge that we had as professionals and as students, as well as the passions, in a tangible project. The final project that Bruno just described to you really allowed that project-based pedagogy, allowed the students to get really engaged and kind of customize a learning project for themselves that would be really impactful and memorable. And it certainly wasn't in the category of busy work, right? It was in the category of applying the things that they care about, which I think led to higher engagement. I talked about the power of reflection, and then, you know, the nice thing about working with so many co-instructors and with Haverford, for me in sustainability education, has just been some of these professional applications to connect to the work that's happening in civic engagement. You know, the work that we've had with Eric, I think, you know, even just connecting him to some of the things that are happening in higher education sustainability has been a win-win and a wonderful opportunity. So looking forward to future partnerships and more lessons learned. And I'll hand it off to Julia to tell you some more.
Okay, bonjour. So some of you have been listening for a while now, and we just do want you to know we're saving time for questions and interactions too. We learned that when we were teaching too. There's a time to listen and then a time to sort of wake up again after a little bit of Zooming. So here, addressing so many colleagues from across the board, but notably in international education, global programming, I know you'll understand this point about the trip. Students who often think that they can get on an airplane and automatically arrive in some destination and it's buongiorno, and all of a sudden I can really be that international person, and how misleading that can be. So traveling back in time to when COVID, as we now know it, was happening and our worlds were unraveling, we knew then that we would not have that same mechanism. How can we confront global processes when we're actually not getting on that plane and there's no measure of, time gap in travel to potentially transform you? Now, there's something lovely about that idea, but obviously, again, it can definitely mislead about the potential for what international education learning is. And I know you know that. But here's the point. That without airplanes, there's still a lot of ways to really engage with what we know are important perspective changes for students who can learn about international perspectives and use them as tools. So toolkit. when Samantha first started talking to us about the toolkit, and I am aging myself here when I tell you that I was like, oh, it's like a textbook. So what does that mean? It means you can dive in, you can pick chapters, you can elaborate. And the wonderful part of this whole story is that we could also not just elaborate, but contribute. So we could send our students back to the toolkit, as Bruno mentioned, and we did that, 50% of the time, and then we could also build. And for those French colleagues who are here, thank you, merci beaucoup. I know you're out there listening. What a joy it was actually at this time when, as Bruno mentioned, I was finishing a semester, trying to recuperate grades, trying to navigate how students were, going to finally take their examen or their évaluation finale, and at the same time building content, knowing that I would actually be able to teach and share other things that we know and love to do about sort of a French version of, and we had the week that worked on engagement, particularly civic engagement. So you'll see there's a chapter there about 1968 in Paris. And that was a really amazing way for us to talk about history. Again, we're not on that plane, we're not walking the pavé of Parisian quartier where things were happening, but we, as much as possible, could allow students to dig into those perspectives. And again, we're talking about the time of uprising in May and June in the United States. So what are our students experiencing on the streets in our week of civic engagement? They're experiencing, thank you, Bruno, they're experiencing protests, they're experiencing reckoning, they're experiencing all kinds of new kinds of dialogues and perspectives that are upsetting and difficult and also truly informational and educational, as we all know, working in the offices we do. So here is one thing that went to our course chat on the WhatsApp, was that there was a first ever BLM protest here in Toulouse, France. And I was able to gather this image that really can concretely make that international connection to students in a timely way, in an immediate way. You'll see, if you look closely, that they're comparing victims of police brutality in both places. And of course, the larger sign below is about Adama Traoré. Now, he was a victim of police brutality here in France. And what had happened previously, so this would be mid-May, that there had been new case rulings, which actually did abscond the gendarme. They were found not guilty of his death. This caused a lot of uproar in France, but certainly not in the same way that international picture could offer. So again, the immediacy that we can offer using real life local examples that fit into global processes, it certainly to me was proven true. Gives me a lot of hope as to how to multiply lenses for students, give them concrete ways to process experiences that don't only necessarily maintain a US sort of bubble dialogue, and we can really break out of that. So it was a real treat to be able to do that with my colleagues here. Again, moving out of silos of just international education, because obviously in the case of looking at the BLM protests, we're talking about diversity, inclusion, we're talking also about sustainable community. Toulouse is our community, and we know people who are attending these marches, and students could really think about how Dickinson has a place in that world. So that's my piece coming from Toulouse, from you, and I'll turn it back. Thanks for listening.
So what next? Sort of just to wrap things up with all of you, and then we're going to turn it over to questions and discourse and sort of thoughts people are having. Really, I would say we got better at so many things simultaneously, right? This was just, our learning curve was huge. The crisis, I think, and working together through the crisis of the spring semester, the academic pivot, getting students home meant that, again, we just in general were communicating and sharing things more regularly. I think paved the way for this. Again, Dickinson had some good foundations of already trust and team building, of strengths in these areas, and some collaboration already that made it possible when I called Lindsey and said, hey, you want to teach a summer course and build these modules? And she was like, sure. We got better at online teaching, which of course is really important for what's coming in the next year. Both Bruno and Julia and many of my staff and team abroad will be either teaching fully online or engaging or team teaching classes this fall at Dickinson. I think that's forever going to change the way that we integrate our faculty and staff all over the world into the classroom at Dickinson. We're using the toolkit content and the course content we developed for some new projects. I know I have CET colleagues here. We're working on high school programs for CET in partnership with CET, and we're using some of this content to build the core course that those students will take, as well as a new semester-long program in DC. We again taught part of the course without using the modules, and we are going to continue to contribute to the toolkit. But I think for the longer term, it's really helped me sort of think and refine the curricular thread throughout the global learning journey at Dickinson, and sort of both on campus as students get ready to go abroad for our international student population, and thinking about sort of what they need to be learning at this moment in time. Our short-term faculty-led programming, sort of rethinking how we're going to do some of that. And lots of continued staff and faculty development across the Dickinson pillars. I have a meeting actually next week with Civic Engagement and the Center for Sustainability Education and our DEI folks to really talk about, again, you know, in this, both during COVID and sort of this remote world, how has our work changed? What do students need to be learning? How can we be working together differently? So, you know, I would just really like to wrap up and say, this built so much momentum for us to think about new projects, to think about new opportunities, to bring this into other consortial spaces that Dickinson is working with. And at a moment, particularly where we needed something hopeful and future forward, and to engage my team particularly in something that felt very positive and generative. So happy now to turn it over to questions. Lindsey's going to moderate the questions for us and sort of delegate them.
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to set up, actually, Bruno, if you want to go to the next slide, and then I have a question for Eric and Sam, and that is, you know, people are wondering about these partnership opportunities moving forward, whether it be in creating the content for the toolkit. That's part one for Eric, and then part two for you, Sam, is like, do you have any hopes or visions of doing this, you know, with multiple institutions, and, you know, what could the next level of this look like in the classroom? So Eric, why don't you start with the toolkit? If people are interested in getting involved in that, what would that look like?
Sure, thanks. And I'll just mention something specifically about civic engagement here for a moment, and then see if my colleague Nora Reynolds would like to expand on the participation opportunities in the toolkit. But something I wanted to emphasize here, as everyone's kind of listening and thinking about relevance, one thing that I think is so vital, and I say this as a civic and global education scholar who writes in these fields, we're talking about civics, so that should be for everyone. Something that colleges struggle with, I think, is figuring out how to do introductory work. All people, everyone, every discipline should be able to be welcome into a shared conversation. That's what we've tried to build here, not something that will scaffold up into a major, but something that can be accessible across people who want to step into what does it mean to be an ethical actor in a world that is just inescapably interdependent. The higher ed, global ed, education abroad sector has spent so much time wondering, am I a global citizen? How do I know if I'm a global citizen? That's COVID shows us that's an uninteresting question. We're interdependent, and the question that comes forward from COVID or from the Black Lives Matter movement and the important protests against white supremacy and police violence is we are interdependent across space and across time. How do we step into that better? So this toolkit, I just wanted to share that emphasis on interdependence and really grounding in a robust conception of global citizenship, which includes local action, and emphasize that we're introducing ideas here as we can't move across space, we can work with people to work into concepts, and concepts help us see better, to analyze better, and then to do better, right? It's all oriented around that kind of trajectory and action. I'm curious to learn more about the civic projects. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of the messages as they pop in on the side. Some examples, I think there were from this summer. But Nora Reynolds, who directs the collaborative, did you want to share anything about participatory opportunities?
Sure, and I will be very brief because I want to open up to some of the questions that are popping into the chat as well. We did just want to explicitly share opportunities to co-contribute, and as Eric said at the beginning, we truly approach this as a public and participatory process, and we want to facilitate and support collaborative work as well in those veins. So I did just pop into the chat a link to a specific page on the toolkit that invites co-contribution. And it gives some guidance there that we think is helpful. So if you have ideas already percolating, I see some folks with specific ideas that are percolating in the chat already. We encourage you to either do that directly through the webpage, or if you want to reach out to either me or Eric as well, we can facilitate that communication. We also specifically have started building out some of these place-based focus pages, and Dickinson folks did some of that, and we have some Philadelphia pages that are more place-based and applied in our context, and have been talking to folks in Pittsburgh. I see some Kalamazoo folks on here as well, talking about a Detroit focus, thinking about our local places and how we can see these issues applied in our local context. It could be a real richness to share with others as well. And then we just finished a 6-week community of practice with folks from different institutions thinking about applications of the toolkit. And some of the ideas coming out of there are maybe a continued community of practice working on collaboratively building out pages around certain regions or issue areas. So if that's something of interest and folks feel like they would want to dive into an experience like that, I encourage you to reach out to me as well and let me know that you would be interested, and we can try to work on facilitating those opportunities for peer-to-peer collaboration and learning together. So take a look and feel free to reach out, but I want to make sure we open up mostly to questions right now.
Yeah, the toolkit offers the multi-institution partnerships are very easy. That's a no-brainer and very possible. Sam, I guess I'd be interested in hearing, do you think there's opportunity, someone's asking for multi-institution partnerships in teaching a course like this? Like, what would be some of the logistical opportunities and challenges with that?
I think absolutely, and actually that's something that Eric and I sort of talked about initially was, could we imagine, I think just with our tight timeline and other things going on, and actually the work that he was doing to put this toolkit into place with all the contributors didn't allow for that this summer, but absolutely, I think the virtual nature of how we're of being able to teach this content, sharing sort of student ideas and resources, I absolutely think it's very possible to imagine. We did it between Spain, France, and Italy and the US. So to imagine doing it across institutions seems even a little bit easier, in fact. So yes, that definitely is possible.
Great. Brian is asking here, Julie, I was wondering if you could share a couple of examples of the projects that the students came up with. He's asking specifically that connect global citizenship and civic engagement. However, I think the thing that we can be most proud of is that they demonstrated the interdependence of sustainability, global and civic in their projects. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lindsay. And thanks for this question, because you do want to, we sound like we've invented something here, but we really haven't. I mean, it's project-based learning, and we really wanted students, again, to apply those lenses. And for of them, it was a hefty job to do so. But specifically to your question, students working together across countries, it was really much more in our final project. And I want to make sure that I'm really answering your question here. I believe I am. In the final project, we had a student work on a single individually chosen project. So in fact, it didn't involve a student working with another student. One example of that is a student who did a project with the School for Field Studies and looked at fishing in the West Indies and in the Virgin Islands, sorry. Did I get that right?
Turks and Caicos.
Thank you. And talked specifically, so this was back to Lindsey's point about processing, sort of, here she spent this time on site understanding about ecology and a lot less about community. So that was a real insight for her to unpack those experiences. So again, this is an example of looking at digging deeper. Civic engagement to her offered what was offered more than understanding true details about sort of sea life. It was understanding, how did this non-government organization that I work with really run? What were the criticisms I can bring? How would I want to work with that differently? So that's herself looking outward. Now, to your question about students working together across countries in collaborative projects, that's definitely a next step to imagine and to take. And it would be, I think, absolutely beneficial to imagine doing so over a longer course, over a semester course, where you can build those relationships in. One thing we knew was that our time would be short, and we did have to condense and sort of start really up and running with students working on a project. And as we all know, that takes some time over a semester. So I hope that that satisfies. So yes, one was about fishing. I can think of another project too that did a similar thing with sustainability, looking at wind power in the Netherlands, and again, applying a critical view based on other impact categories that were not simply about energy production.
Thanks, Julia. And it looks like Bruno has pulled up our resource slide here. The course blog is public. We shared one of the highlighted videos of our students' final project that we are proud of there, that you can explore sort of at your will after this. You know, and those are, again, they're specific examples that where our students were working on things that they were passionate about. You know, I think the thing that excites me most is where this can go from here. So Sam, let's you and I tag team this question from Dan that says, can you please expand on how you're thinking at integrating this curricular thread through short-term faculty-led programs? And I can speak to the sustainability side of that. Dickinson has led faculty professional development for sustainability for almost 13 years. We've put hundreds of our own faculty through that program, and recently we opened up regionally as a ASHE, which is our professional organization for sustainability. We are a regional center for faculty-led professional development. So I am planning on using, you know, in fact, some of the contributions that I made to the toolkit were exercises that I've been doing in our faculty-led workshop or our programs for faculty. But I am hoping now to build in use of the toolkit as a resource for our faculty, and then you know, those faculty can then, the kind of the multiplier effect, be using this in their courses. And Sam and I have partnered together to get our faculty that are interested in leading short-term or long-term programs abroad through our sustainability professional development program, so that we have those natural connections. In fact, Julia is a product of that partnership. And that's sort of how we all got to work together on this. So Sam, what's sort of the future of your, you know, how do you see this playing into faculty-led programs on the global side?
Right, well, I think one of the things that sort of, you know, that we see often as international educators is our students aren't really good at seeing the local, particularly the local of where they're based right now. You know, and a lot of the civic engagement and sustainability work we do at Dickinson is trying to get people, our students, to see the community they live in, Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And usually all of the issues they care about are playing out in Carlisle. And so I think in terms of thinking about how we build this into short-term programming, Lindsey touched on some of it, and that's sort of faculty training pieces. How do we make sure that our faculty know how to do good place-based learning, understand sort of all of these connections themselves so that they can help students navigate this, and really sort of doing some work with students before they go to use Carlisle as the first local place that they see, so that when they get ready when they are abroad, they have a lens and an ability to see their new community abroad as a place, and then also the connectedness between those things. So that's sort of how I'm thinking about how we're going to sort of reshape both what we do with faculty and also some of the pre-student learning and during student learning through, woven throughout our short-term faculty-led programs, regardless of sort of topic or theme.
Sam, thank you. If I could just step in, I just wanted to be sure before folks start to head on to their other meetings to thank you all for presenting, and also to mention to everyone and to address some of the questions that are percolating. I think the strongest thing about what we hope we've been part of co-creating here is that we're co-creating an emergent ecology. I love to see the links from SUNY Coil. It looks awesome. We also connect a lot with the SDGs. And to anyone who's interested, we want to learn from you, and we want to co-create. And we have colleagues in Cape Town who are proposing pages, and Singapore, et cetera. Part of what I think we're building is citizens and educators and students can together be in dialogue and be building piece by pieces, even while we're forced to be physically distant and immobile, as frustrating as that can be for us. Julie Miller is going to drop a link in right now. And we would just, and Brian actually, sorry, Julie Miller's dropping the link in. And if you could all take one moment and respond, there's 3 questions in the survey. Like I mentioned, we've worked to make something that's relevant. We just want to hear from you about your experience today. Thanks, Dan. And we will be sending out an email to everyone who registered that'll link to a webpage next week. It'll have a video here, slides, and other resources. Sam or Dickinson colleagues, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Just again, in terms of the collaborative pieces, we are, we're really open. If people are sparked by what we're doing and want to talk to us or collaborate, we'd be very excited to do that with all of you. I think this is an opportunity moving forward in the field to do much more collaboration, and I'm excited about sort of where that will take us.
Wonderful, thank you. And Julie, there's so many messages, maybe you could drop the survey in one more time if anybody missed it. But folks, as you log off, if you could please complete that for us, we'd appreciate it. Helps us understand how we should move forward. And the next webinar we're offering has a kind of a K-12 focus on community-based student and teacher responses to the current moment. So if anyone is interested in that, I've just dropped the link in as well. When I say we, that's FEND, Pacing the Collaborative. Thank you again, Sam, Julia, Lindsey, and Bruno. We really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.